You won't be seeing much of my face in this video because over the weekend I got into a vicious alley fight with 6 men and won. But I did take some damage to the face. Yeah, alley fight. That's definitely what happened. It's not like I like face planted into the ground or anything. Alright, what's on my reviewing agenda this time? Ooh, it's my lucky day. After watching the mostly average films of the MCU's Phase 1, it's finally time for me to review Marvel's The Avengers. Interestingly, I've been seeing a lot of YouTube critics saying that this movie really isn't as good as everyone remembers. There are complaints that the motives and personalities of the characters are weak, including Loki, or that the lighting was dull and makes the movie look cheap. But I personally remember loving this movie. Let's see if those critics are right.
This is so good. So good.
Yep, it was just as good as I remember. I actually almost liked it more. But what was it about the movie that makes me love it so much? Is it the amazing third act? To be honest, over the years, I've heard a lot of people talk about how amazing the third act of The Avengers is, how it's one of the greatest of all time, and I just don't see it. It's good to be fair, and has some great moments, but it just wasn't as good as it's made out to be. Well, if it's not the third act, then what is it? To me, the whole movie is a fun, well-written piece of entertainment. But what really brings this movie to an A-list level is not the third act, but the second act. And here's why. Now, I don't look at the 1 through 3 act structure the way it's typically supposed to be looked at. On a technical narrative basis, I would say that the second act starts when Loki is captured and on his way to the helicarrier to be locked up. Which would mean that the first clash that we see between Cap, Thor, and Iron Man is part of the second act. And if you want to include that scene, okay, it's not amazing, but it is good, so it doesn't really stand in the way of the quality of the second act. For me, however, the second act starts when Loki has been officially imprisoned on the helicarrier. As soon as Loki enters the ship, he brings an unsettling, menacing presence with him, which only grows as he begins speaking. And that is what makes the second act so great. Not just Loki speaking, but the dialogue in general. The writing was at its peak in this section of the film. Every line has purpose and creates tension, and that tension is caused by character conflict. This is the part of the movie where every main character is in the same place at the same time. Even though they are apart at some moments, the point is that they are all stuck on the same ship and are bound to run into each other, leading to inevitably interact with each other.
I am inevitable.
Thanks to the origin stories, we already know who our characters are, and their personalities have already been reinforced in the first act. Now, I don't have time to point out every example of where the dialogue works to create conflict. If I did, this video would be even longer. I'm just going to walk you through a few good examples. First off, there is one scene where Bruce Banner makes mention about how Loki is crazy. Thor quickly comes to Loki's defense and is a bit offended by Banner's remark because Thor still loves his brother. This shows us that Thor's beliefs and view of Loki are in contrast with everyone else's. Now, let's gradually start taking a closer look at Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. And let's just throw Bruce Banner in the mix. So, Tony and Bruce are smart scientists, while Steve is an old school military captain. Steve is looking at Loki from a strategic standpoint, trying to figure out what Loki's bigger picture is and why Loki allowed himself to be so easily captured. Our scientists, on the other hand, are more worried about finding the Tesseract and figuring out how Loki is going to create the portal. Because Loki is contained in a cage, nobody really listens to Steve's words about Loki still being a threat, and if they do agree with him, such as Bruce Banner, they still don't bother to take action because they don't believe that Loki poses a severe threat. And so they just go about their scientific end of things. Science is practically a foreign language to Steve, who is in the midst of some very scientifically brilliant people, who are now tending to avoid his opinions. Steve tries sounding intelligent in the matters, but is constantly being told that he is wrong or unuseful. For example, when Steve says that the scepter slash mind stone that Loki uses works a lot like a Hydra weapon, Fury shoots his statement down and basically says, no, not really. Along with the technical side of things, the personalities of the characters are also beginning to clash, taking the story to the next level. Steve is very serious and orderly about things. He wants to make sure people are safe. Tony also wants to protect people, but he is much more carefree and reckless. Tony's recklessness and tendency to step outside of the rules concerns and scares Steve, causing Steve to correct Tony, as a military captain would. Now, look at Stark. He has been through terrifying, life-threatening experiences in the last few years. He gave up the entire weapon-selling division of his company because he saw that it was hurting people. He has spent his time trying to make the world a better place and has successfully made a self-sustaining power source that will power Stark Tower for a year. And what does Steve have to say about Tony's huge accomplishment? He refers to Stark Tower as a big ugly building. While Tony was becoming Iron Man and making Stark Tower, Steve was asleep in the ice. In Tony's eyes, Steve is an ignorant old-timer who just comments about things that he doesn't understand, and that gets on Tony's nerves. Tony is going behind Fury's back in order to get secrets because he knows that Fury is hiding something. Steve, on the other hand, is so patriotic that he blindly trusts and believes everything that Fury says. So Steve tells Tony that he should just follow orders. Tony doesn't like it when he isn't in control, and Cap's blind trust in Fury only confirms to Tony that Steve is ignorant. Tony then, at that point, tells Steve that he is pretty much just a mascot who is of no use in finding the Tesseract. Steve and Tony have grown to dislike each other very much. They are both two sides of the same coin, both working towards the same goal, but different in every way. Bruce, on the other hand, is neutral and agrees and disagrees with both Cap and Tony. And because of Banner's suspicion of Fury, Cap decides to look into things, which leads to Cap finding the Phase 2 weapons, causing him to distrust Fury as well. Now there is distrust and conflict between Cap, Tony, and Fury. Elsewhere on the helicarrier, Thor feels guilty for the destruction that Asgard and Loki have brought on Earth, and for the fact that he was unable to change Loki's mind. Everyone else is against Loki because he is clearly a villain. But Thor doesn't want to accept it, causing him to remain somewhat neutral, but also in conflict with the beliefs of everyone else. Natasha Romanoff cares for Clint Barton. Loki has Barton under his mind control, and Natasha wants to make a deal with Loki to save Barton, because without Barton, she would be nothing. Then we get Loki's villain speech, which is one of, if not my favorite parts of the entire movie, especially when he says the line,
"You lie and kill in the service of liars and killers."
This line points out the fact that all of our heroes have a dark side, or at least a dark past, which in Loki's mind proves his idea that humans need to be ruled, otherwise they will just create problems. Bruce Banner helped create the Hulk. Tony's weapons aided terrorists. Cap is loyal to a fault. Fury has an unhealthy habit of keeping secrets and trying to have the upper hand. Natasha is, well, an ex-assassin, and Thor used to crave war. At the end of Loki's speech, we find out that Natasha was toying with him in order to get information. But Loki was still intimidating and makes his point all the same. Then we get to my favorite series of scenes where all of our Avengers, except for Barton, are in one room having a verbal war. I can't do these scenes justice, but here's how the scenes essentially play out. Steve, Bruce, and Tony are angry with Fury for hiding the truth about the weapon manufacturing. Fury points fingers at Thor, stating that the weapons were made so that Earth could defend themselves against threats from other worlds. This now causes tension between Fury and Thor points out that dabbling with the power of the Tesseract is what caused Loki to come to Earth in the first place, which shows us that Thor partially blames Fury for Loki's actions, because Thor is still in denial about the path that his brother has chosen to take. Stark corrects Fury's idea of a nuclear deterrent being the key to peace, and Fury strikes back at Tony by bringing up Tony's past, implying that Tony only got to where he is because he sold weapons. Cap butts into this topic, and Tony tries getting the topic off of himself. Cap then makes a remark about how Tony is only in it for himself, and this leads into one of, if not the most iconic arguments between Captain America and Tony Stark. Banner and Natasha also have some good moments in here, like the fact that Banner believes that S.H.I.E.L.D. just sees him as a monster that needs to be contained. My point here is that everyone has some kind of grudge, untrust, or difference that causes an extremely intense and entertaining clash of ideas and personalities. The last thing that I loved about the second act is the action. The attack on the helicarrier is by far the best action in the movie. It is truly terrifying when the Hulk is trying to kill Natasha. The fight between Thor and the Hulk is so fun to watch. When Cap and Tony work together to fix the propeller, it sets up the other side of their relationship for the franchise. Natasha has to confront her brainwashed friend, and Thor finally understands the horror of what Loki is doing and realizes that Loki has to be stopped, not converted. The whole attack and the failure that it brings is what causes our heroes to put aside their differences and work together for the greater good. And that is what I love about this movie. It's not just a bland team-up movie about coming together.
Come together!
It's about putting aside differences and realizing that at heart, the people around you, your allies, your teammates, and your community are all fighting for the same cause, and because of this, compromise can exist. I give the Avengers a 90% in quality, a 92% in enjoyment for an overall score of 91%. Thanks everyone for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help you be on the lookout for more videos from Luke Film.